Welcome, friends. This is Richard Wolff. Today we need to talk about something that is happening right before our eyes, something that illustrates, perhaps better than any textbook could, the profound structural irrationality of the economic system we live under. I want to talk to you about news coming out of Canada involving a Swedish defense contractor, Saab, and the production of fighter jets. But as always, we are not just talking about airplanes here. We are not just talking about factories or supply chains. We are talking about the way capitalism reorganizes the world, not to meet human needs, not to solve the pressing crises of our time like climate change or poverty, but to maximize profit through the machinery of war. Now, let's look at the specifics. We have reports surfacing that Canada is poised to become a major global hub for the production of military fighter jets, specifically the Swedish Gripen aircraft. The details are striking. A new factory in Montreal, originally valued at around $400 million and involving the Canadian company Bombardier, was initially discussed in the context of orders for Canada and perhaps Ukraine. But now the scope has exploded. We are hearing that this facility is expected to build these machines of war for at least 7 additional nations. We are talking about potentially 400 to 500 aircraft over the next decade or so. They are projecting the creation of up to 6,000 jobs. And the headlines, of course, scream about Pentagon panic and shocking announcements, framing this as a dramatic geopolitical maneuver. But I want you to step back with me. I want you to put on your economist's glasses, not the glasses of the mainstream economists who celebrate every increase in GDP as a victory for humanity, but the critical glasses that allow us to see what is actually going on here. What does it mean when a society, a global economy, can mobilize hundreds of millions of dollars, can coordinate complex international supply chains, can promise thousands of skilled jobs, all for the purpose of building weapons? Why is it that when we ask for money to fix the housing crisis in Montreal or in New York or in London, we are told the cupboard is bare? Why is it that when we demand a transition to green energy to save the planet from ecological collapse, we are told it is too expensive or technically difficult? Yet, when the order comes down to build 500 fighter jets, suddenly the capital is there. Suddenly the factories appear. Suddenly the jobs are created. This is not an accident. This is a feature, not a bug, of the capitalist system. It reveals the priorities of a system that is driven not by the welfare of the people, but by the accumulation of capital. You see, the production of weapons, what we might call the military-industrial complex, is a perfect example of how capitalism solves its own internal problems at the expense of everyone else. Think about it. Capitalism has a chronic problem of overproduction and underconsumption. Workers are not paid enough to buy back the things they produce. This creates a crisis. The capitalists have goods they cannot sell. They have capital they cannot profitably invest. So what do? One solution, a solution that has been used for over a century, is state spending on the military. The government steps in. The government becomes the buyer of last resort. But the government doesn't buy housing for the poor. It doesn't buy high-speed rail for the commuters. It buys jets. It buys missiles. Why? Because these things do not compete with private businesses in the consumer market. If the government built free housing, the private landlords would scream. If the government built excellent public transit, the auto manufacturers would panic. But weapons are destroyed in use or sit in hangars until they are obsolete. They are the perfect commodity for a system that needs to keep producing without actually improving the standard of living for the working class in a way that threatens the power of the owning class. So here we have Saab, a Swedish company, and Bombardier, a Canadian company, coming together in this dance of capital. And notice the international nature of it. Capital has no flag. Capital has no loyalty to a nation state, except insofar as that state can protect its profits. Saab goes to where the conditions are best for production. Canada, with its skilled workforce, its government subsidies, its proximity to the U.S. market, becomes a convenient location. And the workers in Montreal, they are told this is a blessing. They are told, look, 6,000 jobs, and any worker who needs to put food on the table is going to be relieved to have a job. I am not blaming the workers. We all have to survive in this system. But we must critique the system that forces us to choose between unemployment and building the instruments of death. That is the choice capitalism offers us. It says you can starve or you can build a machine designed to kill people in another part of the world. That is a moral obscenity, and it is presented to us as economic progress. The politicians will cut the ribbons. The CEOs will pop the champagne. They will talk about innovation and aerospace leadership. They will not talk about what those jets are for. They will not talk about the resources that were diverted from healthcare, from education, from elderly care to pour concrete for that factory. Let's look deeper at the mechanism here. We are told this factory might produce jets for 7 other nations. This is the globalization of the war economy. It is not just about national defense anymore. It is an export industry. It is a business strategy. War and the preparation for war is a market. And like any market in capitalism, there is competition. There is a drive to expand. If you are producing 500 jets, you need buyers, you need tension, you need conflict. I am not saying the executives at Saab or Bombardier sit in a room and plot to start wars. They don't have to. The system does it for them. The system relies on a world of insecurity to justify the expenditure. If peace broke out tomorrow, real, lasting peace, this factory in Montreal would be a financial disaster. Think about that. We have built an economic engine that shudders and stalls if there is peace. We have built an economy that requires the threat of violence to function profitably. And notice the mention of the Pentagon panic. The United States, the global hegemon, the center of the empire, is always watching. The U.S. military-industrial complex is the largest in the world. It dominates the market. So when Canada starts producing Swedish jets for other nations, there is a competitive anxiety. It's a struggle between capitals. It's a struggle for market share. But notice, again, who pays the price? It is the taxpayers in these 7 nations who will be funding these purchases. It is the working class of those nations who will see their social safety nets eroded to pay for the Gripen jets. And it is the working class of Canada who will be tied to an industry that depends on global instability for its paycheck. This is the trap. Capitalism integrates us all into its dysfunction. It makes us complicit in its madness. A worker in Montreal might think, I am just an engineer. I am just a welder. I am just feeding my family. And that is true. But the labor power of that worker is being harnessed by capital to produce a commodity, the fighter jet, that has no use value for the worker. You cannot eat a fighter jet. You cannot live in it. It does not teach your children. Its only use value is destruction. And its exchange value, the profit it generates, goes to the shareholders of Saab and Bombardier. The worker gets a wage that is a tiny fraction of the value they produced, just enough to keep them coming back the next day. The surplus value, the real wealth, is extracted and accumulated by the few. And what about the historical context? We have seen this before. During the Cold War, the justification was the Soviet Union. We had to build thousands of nukes, thousands of planes to contain communism. And what happened when the Soviet Union collapsed? Did we beat the swords into plowshares? Did we take that massive peace dividend and end poverty? No. The military budget kept growing. New enemies were found. New threats were manufactured. Why? Because you cannot turn off the spigot. You cannot tell General Dynamics or Lockheed Martin or Saab, sorry, we don't need you anymore. They are too powerful. They own the politicians. They control the narrative. The economy has become addicted to military spending. It is a form of military Keynesianism, using the state to pump money into the economy through the military sector because the private sector cannot generate enough demand on its own. Now, this new factory in Canada represents a shifting of these tectonic plates. It suggests a diversification of the supply chain for Western military powers. It suggests that as the U.S. empire faces challenges, internal political chaos, external economic competition from China, its allies are hedging their bets. They are building their own capacities. They are integrating their military industries. Canada, Sweden, these other 7 nations, they are locking themselves into a long-term commitment to militarism, 400 to 500 aircraft over 10 to 15 years. That is a plan. That is a commitment of resources for a generation. It means that for the next 15 years, the best minds in aerospace engineering in Montreal will be thinking about how to make a plane fly faster and drop bombs more accurately, rather than thinking about how to design efficient public transport or renewable energy systems. This is the brain drain that capitalism causes, a drain of talent away from life-affirming industries toward life-destroying ones. We have to ask ourselves, is this efficient? Mainstream economics loves to talk about efficiency. They say the market allocates resources efficiently. Look at this and tell me it is efficient. We have a world burning up from climate change. We have a world where millions die from preventable diseases. And the efficient market allocation is to build a new factory for fighter jets in Montreal. It is absurd. It is irrational. It is only efficient if your only goal is the preservation of the capitalist order and the maximization of profit for defense contractors. From the perspective of human needs, it is a colossal waste. It is a theft. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. Eisenhower said that. A general said that. Even he understood the monstrous trade-off. But under capitalism, this trade-off is hidden. It is obscured by the language of jobs and security. They dangle the 6,000 jobs in front of us like a carrot. And let's be honest, 6,000 jobs is a lot of jobs. In a depressed economy, in a neoliberal economy where good unionized manufacturing jobs have been decimated, where precarity is the norm, those jobs are a lifeline. But why can we only create good jobs by building weapons? Why can't the government say, we are going to hire 6,000 people in Montreal to retrofit every home for energy efficiency? We are going to hire 6,000 people to build a new high-speed rail network. Why is that socialism and unaffordable? But building jets for foreign wars is patriotic and necessary? The answer lies in the class struggle. Public spending on social goods, on housing, on healthcare, on education empowers the working class. If you have guaranteed housing, you are less afraid of your boss. You are less likely to take a terrible job just to survive. If you have free education, you are more critical, more aware. The capitalist class does not want a secure, empowered working class. That is bad for profits. It drives up wages. But military spending, that doesn't empower the workers. It disciplines them. It rallies them around the flag. It creates a sense of external threat that distracts from the internal exploitation. And the products produced, the weapons, do not enter the consumer market to compete with private capital. They are sold to the state, guaranteeing a profit. It is the perfect scam. So when you read about this deal in Montreal, about Saab and the Gripen jets, do not just see airplanes, see the symptoms of a dying system that is lashing out. See the desperation of an economy that can only find growth in destruction. See the tragedy of human potential being channeled into the machinery of war, and understand that this is not inevitable. It is a choice. It is a political and economic choice made by those who hold power, and it is a choice we can unmake. But to unmake it, we first have to understand it. We have to see through the propaganda. We have to recognize that the Pentagon panic is not our panic. Their struggle for dominance is not our struggle. Our struggle is for a world where we build things that help us live, not things that help us die. This factory is a microcosm. It shows us the intersection of state power and corporate power. The state facilitates the deal, provides the permits, perhaps provides tax breaks or infrastructure support. The corporation brings the capital and the technology. The workers bring the labor, and the product is death. This is the trinity of the military-industrial complex, and it is expanding. It is going global. Canada is stepping up its role. It is no longer just the peacekeeper of its own mythology. It is becoming a forge for the weapons of the next wars. This changes the character of the nation. It changes the political economy of the region. Montreal becomes a node in the global network of violence. And let's consider the timing. Why now? Why this massive expansion? Because global capitalism is in crisis. The old order led by the US is fracturing. There is instability everywhere. In times of instability, capital seeks safety, and paradoxically, investing in the tools of war is seen as a safe bet. It is a hedge against chaos, but it also fuels the chaos. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. By arming the world, by pouring billions into advanced weaponry, we ensure that the conflicts of the future will be deadlier, more destructive. We are building the pyre upon which we will be burned, and we are calling it economic development. This is the critique we must make. We cannot just accept the press release. We cannot just nod along with the job numbers. We have to ask, jobs doing what? Jobs for whom? At what cost to the planet? At what cost to our humanity? The labor movement, the progressive movement must grapple with this. We cannot be bought off with crumbs from the military budget. We have to demand a just transition, not just from fossil fuels, but from the war economy. We have to demand that our factories be converted to useful production. We have to demand that our skills be used to solve the problems of life, not to perfect the instruments of death. This is the challenge of our time, and it starts by looking at a news story like this and telling the truth about what it really represents. It represents a failure of imagination, a failure of morality, and a failure of an economic system that has long outlived its usefulness. In the next part of this discussion, we are going to dive deeper into the specific mechanisms of how these deals are structured, who really profits, and how this ties into the broader geopolitical strategy of the Western powers. We need to follow the money. We need to see how the surplus value extracted from the workers in Sweden and Canada flows into the pockets of the financial elite. But for now, let this sink in. In a world of desperate need, we are building 500 new fighter jets. That fact alone should be enough to radicalize you. That fact alone is an indictment of capitalism that no amount of PR can wash away. I'm Richard Wolff. Thank you for joining me.